Good morning, my fellow yogic travelers. I'm mighty glad to be alive today, and I hope that you are too. Awakening joy in your life is a tough nut to crack, and people get waylaid by believing that awakening joy means you'll only have positive thoughts or positive experiences. And of course, that's what keeps you stuck in the prison of bad predictability. The key, of course, is to realize that your subconscious mind is like a sensitive recording plate. Whatever you claim and believe is true, your subconscious mind accepts and then tries to bring it into your experience. Like soil that accepts seeds that are either good or bad, it doesn't discriminate, but it brings forth after its kind. Once you realize that suggestion cannot impose upon your subconscious mind anything that's against the will of your conscious mind, suggestion can't impose something on your conscious mind that's against the will of your conscious mind. So by repetition, by faith, by expectation, you build up this relationship between your subconscious mind and your conscious mind. So remember that when we talk about affirmation at the end of this session. Nonetheless, today we're going further on with my fairy tales or initiation tales. And although I talk about them as being initiation tales for male or female because that's how the protagonist in the story seems to be, they're really genderless. It's really about consciousness. And once you break down the symbols, then you're really looking at the story not as a narrative about something that's happening outside of you, but of psychological processes that as you look at your own historical timeline, you'll be able to make the associations that the images in the story bring up. So today is another one from Grimm's, but I also heard it through Michael Mead, who I suggest you check his whole life work on Mosaic. He's out there in Vashon Island, west of Seattle. Great drummer, mythologist, and a peaceful poet. Okay, and he does great work with youth at risk. All right, this is called The Drummer. Once upon a time, there was a drummer who was walking out by the lake one night, and also he thought he heard some voices, but more important than that was he found three different pieces of linen material hanging on a tree. It was such a fine material, and I don't know what prompted him to take one, but he took one shift and put it in his jacket and started to walk away. But then all of a sudden, he thought he heard the flutter of wings. Maybe it was just in his mind. Anyway, when he got back home and he went to sleep, a voice called to him, "Drummer, drummer, give me my shift back." He waking up. What? What do you mean? Who's that? And this disembodied voice said to him, "I'm a king's daughter, and I've been enchanted by a witch with my two sisters. And every day we're given permission to fly to this lake to bathe ourselves, but we have to go back. And without the shift, I can't go back." He says, "Well, I'll gladly give you the shift back. I didn't realize. Sorry." So all of a sudden, he heard the wings flapping and he says, wait, where are you going? He says, "I have to go back. I'm captive and enchanted. I'm being held on the top of this glass mountain." He says, "Well, I'd be glad to come and help you get out of that." He says, No. First of all, no one can get up the glass mountain. And besides that, to get to the glass mountain, you have to go through this forest of man-eating giants. It just won't work for you." He says, "No, listen, once I put my mind to something, there's nothing I can't do." He says, "Well, you can try if you want to, but I don't think it's going to happen." And anyway, the flutter of wings happened again, and off she went, and there he was. Well, he was really determined, so off he went, and the first thing he had to do was go through the forest of man-eating giants. But he was a different kind of person because as he walked into the forest, I'd probably be scared shitless about thinking of facing a giant that was a man-eating giant, but not him. He said, "It's too quiet around here." So he took out his drum and he just banged out a rhythm like that, and all of a sudden, some giant woke up from his sleep, and giants hate to be wakened from their sleep. And so he says, "You little worm, you little ant, I'm just going to crush you for disturbing my sleep." He says, "I wouldn't do that if I was you." He said, "Oh yeah, why not?" "Well, if I don't give a signal back to my people that I'm okay, then 10,000 more people like me will come, and when you're sleeping, they'll crawl into your ear, and then with steel hammers, they'll knock your brains out. Wow. Well, that freaked out the giant because he said, listen, I can deal with wolves and bears and lions and stuff like that, but little beings like this with hammers that would disturb my sleep? No way. All right, I'll make a deal with you. If you call your people and tell them not to come here, I'll take you wherever you want to go. He said, okay, fine. So he says, I want to go to the Glass Mountain. So the giant put him up on his lapel, and from there he had a really nice view of what was going on, and he went a long way or a short way or whatever way it takes in these stories, and all of a sudden he came to another giant and says, I can't take you anymore from here. So he put him up onto the giant's shoulder, and he had a better view from the second giant than from the first giant. And this giant took him again a long way or a short way or whatever way it took. And then he took him to a third giant, passed him on to that one, and that giant put him up at the brim of his hat, and now he could really see what was going on out there. And this giant, 2 steps, and he delivered him right to the Glass Mountain. And he said, can't you help me any further? He says, no, I don't even go to the Glass Mountain myself. And out he went. Well, he was standing there. He made the attempt to try to get him to the Glass Mountain, but you can understand there's no thing to grip. And it was high as like 3 mountains. It was like ridiculous. So he said, despondent, how am I going to get there? And then all of a sudden he heard these 2 guys arguing. And he looked around, and there were 2 guys, and they were arguing about who was going to get this saddle. And it just seemed absurd because what's the difference who's going to get the saddle? There's no horse to ride it. So he interrupted him and says, what are you guys fighting about? He said, no, you don't understand. This is a magic saddle. All you have to do is get on it and think where you want to go, and you're there right away. Said, oh, I understand. Okay, well, maybe I can help you guys out. Why don't I put a marker about 50 yards down over here, and then we'll have a race. And I'll say 1, 2, 3, go. And then whoever races to the marker first, you get the saddle. So the 2 guys thought that was a good idea, but they didn't realize that the drummer was a little stealthy here. So he got him on the starting line. He moved the stick 50 yards away, said 1, 2, 3, go. They ran to the stick. He hopped on the saddle and said, top of the Glass Mountain. And there he was on the top of the Glass Mountain. Now, once he got to the top of the Glass Mountain, there was a shack there with smoke coming out of the chimney. He said, well, this must be the place. So he knocked on the door, and an old woman with wrinkly skin and red flaming eyes came. What do you want? Lodging for the night and some food. It's a good thing you know what you want. But if I give it to you, you have to work for me. He says, I'm not afraid of work. Fine. So she gave him some food and a bed to sleep in. And in the morning, when he woke up, he said, okay, here's your task for the day. He gave her a thimble. She gave him a thimble. He said, I want you to go to the lake. I want you to thimble out the whole lake. And then when you do, I want you to put all the fish in order by size, by shape, by color, and so forth. Got it? And if you don't do that, there might be a nasty ending for you. So out he went, and like the good soldier, he started thimbling and thimbling and thimbling. You know what? But if you've ever tried to thimble a lake out, you could thimble for 1,000 years. It ain't going to happen. So by noon, he was despondent, and he said, oh, what am I going to do? And all of a sudden, a beautiful young maiden came out and said, I see what your problem is. You look very sad. I can help you if you want. Sure. He says, well, why don't you just lay your head in my lap, and I'll help you out. He put his head in her lap, and right away he fell asleep. And then she took out her magic wishing ring and twisted it this way and twisted it that way, and all of a sudden, all the water came out of the lake, and all the fish just lined up by size, by shape, by color, and so forth. And then he woke up. He was amazed to see it happen. He said, now listen, when the witch comes back, she said, she's going to notice that everything was done except that there's one fish that's out of place. And when she mentions that fish, take that fish up and whack her in the head, and then see what happens. Well, what are you going to do? So that she disappeared. The witch came back, and she said, how did you do this? This is amazing. But what's this one fish doing out of place? And he grabbed the fish and smacked her in the face, and she pretended not to notice. And then he spent the night in the house of a woman who, when you smack her in the head with a fish, she pretends not to notice. But that's how it went. Anyway, the next day, he got up again. He said, now, I have another task for you. So he said, okay, what's that? I want you to chop down this whole forest and stack the wood by size, by shape, and so forth like that. And she gave her an axe that was made of tin and a couple of flimsy wedges. And within a few chops, the axe broke and the wedges were no good. And then he stood there again early on in the day realizing, oh my God, I can't do this task. He probably realized his life was at risk. So he was sitting there bemoaning his fate when another young, beautiful woman came out. And she said, I know what's happening. So she gave him some food, eat, rest, take a little nap, put your head in my lap. So that's what he did gladly, closed his eyes. She took out her magic ring, switched it this way and that way, and all of a sudden all the wood got chopped out of the forest and aligned in size and shape and so forth. And then when he woke up and he saw everything was done, he was overjoyed again. She said, now listen, when the witch comes back, she's going to see that one of these pieces of wood are out of place, doesn't belong. And when she makes a comment about it, pick up the wood and smack her in the head with it again, and then see what happens. Well, what can you do? If that's the advice that you're getting from your guide, you do it. So the witch came back, and of course, she noticed immediately this one piece of wood was out. He grabbed the wood plank, hit her in the head. She didn't even notice. He spent the night in the way you might think of spending a night after you smacked the witch in the head with a 2x4, but that's how it went. Anyway, third time is the charm. Third day, she got up and said, now listen, I want you to make all the wood that we've chopped down into a huge fire because these old bones of mine are so, it's so cold. I just need a good fire. So what do? So he started to make the fire up, and of course, as the fire was starting to blaze, another young maiden came out and said, now listen, when the witch is going to ask you to do something, don't hesitate to do exactly what she says. So at this point, what could he do? These maidens have guided him so well. So he started the fire, and it was an insane blaze. And the witch said, okay, so now I want you to jump into the fire. What? Yes, jump into the fire. So he remembered what the maiden said. And he didn't waste time. He just jumped into the fire. And the minute that he jumped into the fire didn't burn him at all, but pushed him back out. And once he was pushed out, he grabbed the witch and threw her into the fire. And as soon as he threw her into the fire, another young maiden popped out of the fire, and he knew that this was the maiden who was the king's daughter. And it was fantastic because the fire seemed to be applauding and clapping the fact that they were burning the witch up. And so that was the end of the witch. And here was the drummer with the princess, and the enchantment was broken. You think that's the end of the story? No, not the end of the story. So anyway, he said, well, listen, now that the witch is gone, what do you suggest? He says, well, listen, I want to take you for my husband. He said, I think that's fantastic. And so she said, listen, the witch has so much treasure here. Let's fill our pockets with the jewels and the different things that we need, and we'll be successful the rest of our life. He said, that's great. And so he said, all right, so here's what's going to happen. Let's go back and tell my parents what the whole story is, and we'll get married there. We'll just jump on my saddle, and we'll get this. She said, I don't want to jump on your saddle. Let's use my wishing ring. So she turned it this way and turned it that way, and all of a sudden they were right outside the town where his parents lived. And he said, listen, this is a lot to tell my parents what's happened in these last couple of days. So why don't you wait here? I'll go tell my parents what's happening, and then I'll come back and I'll bring you, and we can get married. She said, I don't know if this is such a good idea, but all right, I'll let you go. But please listen to what I'm about to say. Do not kiss your parents on the right cheek. If you kiss your parent on the right cheek, you'll forget all about me, and it's over. He says, I'll never forget about you. Come on. But you know how these stories go. When he got back, his parents were so glad to see him. They just smothered him with kisses, and he forgot, and he kissed his mom on the right cheek. And the moment he did, he completely forgot everything that had happened up to then. And when his parents saw that his pockets were filled with jewels, they built a new house, and they found somebody for him to marry. But they didn't realize that this was not the right person for him to marry. Nonetheless, after a short time or a long time, whatever time it takes in these stories, the king's daughter realized something must have happened because he didn't come back to me. He must have kissed his parents on the cheek. So she wandered down into town, and she was listening to what was happening, and everybody was talking about this wedding that was about to be prepared. So she said, oh my God, I have to find some way to get to him. So that's what she did. She twisted her ring and she said, make me a dress as bright as the sun. And all of a sudden she had a dress on her that was magnificent. And so she walked down towards where the town hall was, where the bride-to-be was getting the preparations ready for the wedding. And when the bride-to-be saw this golden wedding gown, she said, oh my God, that is so beautiful. I'd love that for my wedding gown. And she said, well, I'll make a deal with you. If you let me sleep outside of your groom-to-be's bedroom tonight, I'll give you the dress. Well, the woman said, fine. So, but what the bride-to-be did was she put a sleeping potion in the draught of wine, and that night, when the drummer drank the wine, he fell soundly asleep. And he didn't hear that outside his door, that his true bride was saying, drummer, drummer, I pray you hear. Have you forgotten you held me dear? On that glass mountain we sat hour by hour, that I rescued your life from the witch's power. Did you not plight your troth to me? Drummer, drummer, hearken to me. But he was dead asleep, couldn't hear. Well, the next day, it was a 3-day preparation for the wedding. She twisted her ring again and said, silvery as the moon. And now she had another garment that was even more beautiful than the sun dress. And she went by again to the town hall where the preparations were being made, and the future supposed bride saw this dress and said, oh, I have to have that dress. And the king's daughter said, well, you know the deal. Let me sleep outside your groom-to-be's room and you can have the dress. So that's what happened. Second time it went down just like the first time. She gave him a sleeping potion. He fell asleep, didn't know what was going on. The king's daughter sat outside his room, lamenting one more time, drummer, drummer, I pray you hear. Have you forgotten you held me dear? That on that glass mountain we sat hour by hour? That I rescued your life from the witch's power? Did you not plight your troth to me? Drummer, drummer, hearken to me. Dead to the world. Now, you know, they say things that happen once never happen again, but things that happen twice almost assuredly will happen 3 times. And so the third time repeated. This time she took her ring and said, beautiful as the stars. And now she had another garment that put the sun garment and the moon garment to shame. And when she went by the town hall this time, the bride-to-be said, oh, I have to have that dress. And so they made the deal one more time. But the only difference was that some people who were working in the home where the drummer was sleeping, they had heard the lament the last 2 nights. And during the day they said to the drummer, you know, we heard this strange thing outside your room last night about this woman lamenting about being up on the mountain with you. And so, you know what they're talking about? And it kind of tweaked his memory to a certain extent, but now he was kind of suspicious about the fact that he was so deep in sleep he didn't hear anything. And so this time when his supposed bride-to-be gave him a draught of wine with a sleeping potion, he pretended to drink it, but he didn't really drink it, he poured it out. So that night, when he feigned going to sleep, and she came back and sang the refrain once again, drummer, drummer, I pray thee hear. Have you forgotten you held me dear? That on the glass mountain we sat hour by hour, and I rescued your life from the witch's power. Drummer, drummer, plight your troth to me, hearken to me. This time he woke up and he realized what was happening. And he apologized so much. I'm sorry, I forgot what you told me. I kissed my parents and I forgot everything, and this is what it comes to. But now I realize everything is made right and we're together. So he went to the parents and said, this is the true bride. The other bride, you know what? She was only a garment bride. And when the situation was explained, the supposed bride-to-be said, I'm satisfied with the dresses. And so the drummer married the king's daughter, and they lived happily ever after, so they say. And the garment bride was satisfied with what she had. That's the story of the drummer. And as you know, I usually like to break down the symbols and say something to give you a clue if the way the story unfolds is kind of cryptic and you don't understand. But that would prevent you from letting those images run around in your own head. Just remember, look for an entry point into the story. That means an energy rise, something that makes you laugh, something that offends you, something that is impossible, something that's too magical to believe, something that doesn't make sense. Anything like that, that's your doorway into the story. And you try to work with that symbol for a while. And if you can do that, you learn more and more the symbolic code that exists in a lot of these stories. And then the most important thing is, what in your own personal life do these things psychologically represent, and how you can work the story that way. All right? Take care. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. I'll put out another affirmation and audio affirmation along with this recording.